Imagine finding out your own daughter celebrated one of the biggest milestones of her life, and you weren't even invited. That was my reality, but what started as heartbreak became the beginning of my greatest transformation. My name is Margaret, and for as long as I can remember, my world has revolved around my daughter, Lily. She was my miracle child, the one I was told I might never have. When she came into this world, I promised myself I would give her every ounce of love and support I could. I worked 2 jobs when she was younger, saving every penny to ensure she never felt the absence of her father, who left us when she was only 5. I became both mother and father, cheerleader and disciplinarian. Every school recital, every late-night fever, every tear after a heartbreak, I was there. She was my pride, my reason, my heart outside my body. So when she called to tell me she was engaged, I cried tears of joy. I pictured us shopping for dresses, choosing flowers, laughing over cake samples. In my mind, it was the moment we had both been waiting for, a chance to celebrate not just her love, but the years we had weathered together as a team. A week later, I casually asked her, "Sweetheart, what time is the engagement dinner? I want to make sure I have the day off." Her response shattered me. "Oh, we had it yesterday," she said, her voice almost nonchalant, like she was talking about the weather. At first, I thought I had misheard. My ears rang, my chest tightened. I laughed nervously, hoping she was joking. But she wasn't. They had celebrated without me. Her fiancé, his family, even some of my relatives, and I hadn't even been invited. The silence on my end must have lasted too long because she sighed and added, "Mom, it was just easier this way. You know how things can get complicated. That word stung more than anything. I had spent my life simplifying her world so she could thrive. And now, for her most important milestone, I was deemed too complicated to include. I hung up the phone, my hands trembling. The walls of my house, once filled with memories of her growing up, now felt like they were closing in on me. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, to remind her of the sacrifices I made. But instead, I sat down at the kitchen table, my heart splintering into pieces, realizing that sometimes the people you love the most can cut you the deepest, and that was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes from crying most of the night. My kitchen table still had the coffee mug from the day before sitting on it, untouched, cold. I stared at the empty chair across from me, the chair I had imagined my daughter sitting in as we planned her big day. Instead, it was a reminder that she had chosen to fill that chair with someone else. I tried to convince myself it was a misunderstanding. Maybe it wasn't really an engagement dinner. Maybe it was just a casual get-together. But the photos told a different story. When I logged onto social media, there they were, my daughter in a white dress, glowing with joy, surrounded by her fiancé's family, smiling relatives, and even mutual friends. Toasts were made, cake was cut, and laughter filled the captions. My name wasn't mentioned once. It was as if I didn't exist. I sat there scrolling, my stomach twisting tighter with every image. I could almost hear their voices. His mother proudly giving a speech, his father raising a glass, my own family members clinking forks against glasses to cheer them on. Not one of them thought to ask, "Where is Margaret?" I put my phone down, fighting the urge to call Lily in a fit of anger. But a mother's heart is strange. It can be shattered into pieces and still cling to hope. Maybe she was pressured. Maybe her fiancé's family didn't want me there. Maybe this wasn't really her choice, but deep down, I knew. My daughter had made a decision. She had drawn a line, and I was on the outside of it. I walked to the living room and picked up the old photo album. Inside were pictures of her first birthday, where I had stayed up all night making a cake shaped like a butterfly. Her prom night, where I stood on the porch taking endless photos while she rolled her eyes. Her college graduation, where I clapped so hard my hands hurt, page after page, there I was, always there. And now, when it mattered most, I was erased. I closed the album, pressing it to my chest. I told myself not to cry again, but the tears came anyway, not just because I was hurt, but because for the first time in her life, my daughter had chosen a world where I wasn't welcome, and that cut deeper than any word ever could. In the days that followed, The silence between Lily and me grew heavier. She didn't call. She didn't text. And every time my phone buzzed, I prayed it would be her, finally realizing how deeply she had hurt me. But the messages were from coworkers, old friends, even telemarketers, everyone but my daughter. Word spreads fast in families. Within a week, I began receiving subtle messages from relatives. My sister called, her voice hesitant. "Margaret, I heard about the dinner. Lily looks so beautiful. You must be proud." Proud? The word felt like salt on an open wound. "I wasn't there," I said flatly. There was a pause on the other end, then the familiar excuse. "Oh. Well, I'm sure there was a reason. You know how kids are these days, but I wasn't a fool." Her tone carried the weight of something unsaid. I could almost hear the whispers running through the family grapevine. Stories being told about me, about why I hadn't been invited. Later, at the grocery store, I bumped into an old neighbor. She smiled awkwardly and said, "I saw the photos online. Such a shame you couldn't make it." Her eyes betrayed her words. She knew I hadn't been invited. It felt as though everyone knew something I didn't. That night, I sat on my bed replaying old conversations with Lily. I remembered the subtle changes in her tone over the past year. The way she started saying, "Mom, maybe you don't need to come to this," or "It'll be easier if just his family is there." At the time, I brushed it off as her adjusting to a new relationship. Now, I wondered if it had all been leading to this, me being slowly pushed out. I asked myself 1,000 questions. Was I too protective? Did I hold on too tightly when she was growing up? Did I say something to offend her fiancé's family? I searched every corner of my memory, trying to find the moment I became unworthy of a seat at her table. The worst part wasn't just missing the dinner, it was the realization that my daughter might have been preparing me for this distance all along. And I, blind with love, hadn't seen it. I turned off the light, lying in bed as the whispers of doubt filled the room. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like Lily's mother. I felt like a stranger. The week after the engagement dinner stretched into a blur of waiting. Every evening, I sat by the phone, convincing myself that tonight would be the night Lily called. She would say, "Mom, I made a mistake. I should have told you. Can we talk?" I practiced my response in my head, promising myself I would forgive her if she just reached out. But the phone stayed silent. Instead, I saw updates online, photos of her trying on dresses with her future in-laws, posts about family dinners where his relatives gathered around her, smiling as if she had always belonged to them. Not once did anyone seem to notice my absence. It was as though I had been erased, replaced by a new version of family that didn't include me. I started to wonder if she was avoiding me on purpose. Was she afraid of how I'd react? Or worse, was she relieved I wasn't part of it? That thought gnawed at me in the quiet hours of the night. Finally, I picked up the phone myself. My fingers shook as I dialed her number. When she answered, her voice was cheerful, almost too cheerful. "Hi, Mom?" she said brightly, as though nothing had happened. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Lily, why didn't you invite me to the engagement dinner?" There was a pause, then a sigh. "Mom, I didn't want to hurt your feelings, but it was small. Just his family. I thought it would be simpler." Simpler. The word echoed in my mind like a cruel joke. Simpler to cut me out? Simpler to celebrate without me? I tried to keep my voice steady. "I'm your mother, Lily. How could it be simpler without me there?" Her tone grew sharper. "Mom, please don't make this a big deal. It's just one dinner. You'll be at the wedding, of course. Just one dinner." But to me, it wasn't just one dinner. It was the first milestone in her new life, and I had been deliberately excluded. After we hung up, I sat in the dark, realizing that the call I had waited for all week would never come. The apology I hoped for wasn't coming either. Instead, I was left with a daughter who believed I was too complicated, too much trouble, too inconvenient to include. And that realization cut deeper than silence ever could. The house felt colder after that call. Every corner seemed to whisper memories of Lily as a child, memories that now felt like ghosts haunting me. In the kitchen, I remembered her perched on a stool, her little legs swinging as she helped me stir brownie batter. In the hallway, I saw the pencil marks on the wall where I measured her height every birthday, watching with pride as she grew taller. In her old bedroom, now mostly empty, I could still picture the walls plastered with posters of her favorite bands, the nights I sat by her side when thunder scared her. I had given her everything I had, my time, my energy, my heart. And now she was giving everything to someone else's family, while I was left standing in the shadows. I tried to distract myself. I cleaned the house, took long walks, even joined a book club at the library. But no matter what I did, the silence of being left out pressed against me like a weight. I would catch myself staring out the window, wondering what Lily was doing, if she thought of me at all. One afternoon, I bumped into my cousin at the post office. She smiled awkwardly, her eyes darting away. "I heard the engagement dinner was beautiful," she said. I nodded stiffly. "Yes, I heard too." She hesitated, then added softly, "Margaret, people are saying you didn't come because you didn't approve of the match." My breath caught. "What? That's not true." She gave me a pitying look. "I know, but that's what's going around." I walked home with my chest tight, realizing the truth was being twisted. Not only had I been excluded, but now I was being painted as the problem. My absence was being rewritten as a choice, a rejection, when in reality, I had been rejected. That night, I sat with the photo album again. This time I didn't cry. Instead, I stared at the pages with a hollow ache. Memories once filled with warmth now felt like reminders of how far apart we had grown. The ghosts of the past couldn't comfort me anymore. They only deepened the emptiness of the present. I thought about confronting Lily again. I drafted messages in my phone, long paragraphs spilling out my hurt, my disappointment, my confusion. But each time I deleted them before hitting send. What was the point? She had already made it clear. My presence wasn't essential. So instead, I stayed silent. When friends asked how wedding planning was going, I forced a smile and said, "Oh, it's coming along beautifully." When coworkers asked if I was excited, I nodded, swallowing the bitterness that rose in my throat. My silence became my shield. But inside, the storm only grew stronger. Late one night, I scrolled through the engagement photos again. One picture caught my eye. Lily standing beside her future mother-in-law, both of them holding hands, smiling like lifelong friends. I zoomed in, noticing how comfortable she looked, how natural. That should have been me. That was supposed to be my role. The realization twisted like a knife. Lily didn't just exclude me. She replaced me. The silence I had chosen suddenly felt like surrender. By keeping quiet, I was allowing their version of the story to stand uncontested. They thought I didn't come. They thought I disapproved. And Lily wasn't correcting them. I sat up in bed, my heart racing. For the first time, anger burned hotter than sadness. Maybe I had been silent too long. Maybe it was time my daughter remembered who I was, the woman who had carried her, raised her, sacrificed for her. Silence might protect me, but it wouldn't save the bond I was losing. And if I didn't speak soon, there might be nothing left to salvage. The breaking point came one Sunday afternoon. I was folding laundry when my phone buzzed with a group message. It was from a family relative. "Can't wait for Lily's bridal shower next week. It's going to be beautiful." My hands froze. Bridal shower? I hadn't heard a word about it. I scrolled through the messages, my stomach dropping with every detail. Decorations being planned, gifts already purchased, people volunteering to bring food. Once again, everyone had been included. Everyone but me. This wasn't an oversight. This was deliberate. The room spun as the truth solidified. I wasn't just being left out of one dinner. I was being excluded from the entire process, step by step, celebration by celebration, until I no longer had a place in my own daughter's life. I sank into a chair, clutching my phone, my chest tight with rage and grief. I wanted to scream, to call Lily and demand an explanation. But then a chilling thought crossed my mind. What if she told me she didn't want me there at all? What if hearing it out loud made it real? Tears blurred my vision as I sat there, my laundry forgotten. My daughter's milestones were becoming her in-laws' victories, and I was nothing more than a shadow watching from the sidelines. That evening, I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was lined with exhaustion, my eyes red from too many sleepless nights. I barely recognized the woman staring back. For years, I had been the strong one, the dependable one, the mother who never faltered. Now I was reduced to a silent observer in my own child's life. The breaking point wasn't just about missing a bridal shower. It was about realizing that if I didn't act, I would lose her completely, and for the first time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to fight to be included, or if I needed to prepare myself to walk away. The days after learning about the bridal shower were some of the heaviest I had ever endured. It wasn't just the event itself, it was the growing realization that I had been cut out of every circle that once defined my life. I couldn't focus at work. I'd catch myself staring blankly at my computer screen, my thoughts spinning back to Lily. My coworkers assumed I was just tired, maybe grieving my husband again. None of them knew the truth, that I was grieving my daughter while she was still alive. At the grocery store, I avoided the aisles where I might run into acquaintances. I didn't want to hear the inevitable question, "Are you excited for the wedding?" I didn't want to paste on a fake smile and lie my way through another conversation. The loneliness was suffocating. My phone, once buzzing with messages from Lily about everyday things, recipes she wanted to try, questions about bills, little updates about her day, was now silent. It felt like she had erased me from her life in one swift motion, and everyone else was simply following her lead. One night, I sat at the dining table and set out 2 plates, like I used to do when Lily was younger. For a moment I imagined her walking through the door, dropping her bag and plopping down in the chair across from me. I even whispered, "Dinner's ready." But the chair stayed empty, the food went cold, and I ended up eating alone, tears sliding down my face. I couldn't understand it. I replayed my life over and over in my mind, searching for the moment when I became unwanted. Had I been too strict, too protective, or maybe too vocal about not wanting her to rush into things? The unanswered questions weighed more heavily than the exclusion itself. At least if I knew why, I could make sense of it. Instead, I was left in the dark, abandoned without explanation. And the cruelest part? Even through the pain, my heart still longed for her. Despite everything, if she called me tomorrow, I knew I would answer on the first ring. That's the curse of being a mother. You love even when it hurts. But love unreturned begins to fester into something else. And slowly, my grief was transforming into something sharper, something that would not stay silent forever. The silence in my home became unbearable. Every creak of the old floorboards reminded me that no one else was coming through the door. My late husband's absence still haunted me, but now Lily's absence layered on top of that grief, turning my home into an echo chamber of loss. I tried distracting myself with hobbies. I baked pies, read old novels, and worked in the garden, but everything reminded me of her. The kitchen smelled of her favorite blueberry muffins. The books reminded me of when she used to beg for just one more chapter at bedtime. The garden still had the roses we planted together when she was 15. Even my neighbors noticed. Mrs. Carter, who often waved from across the street, came by with a casserole one evening. She said she hadn't seen Lily around and asked how wedding preparations were going. I froze. My hands tightened around the casserole dish as I lied through my teeth, mumbling something about keeping things small. It was humiliating, pretending to be included, when in reality, I had been erased. At night, I scrolled through social media, punishing myself with pictures of the life I was no longer invited to. There was Lily with her fiancé, smiling at a brunch I hadn't known about. There she was trying on dresses with her friends. Each photo was a dagger to the heart. The house no longer felt like a home. It felt like a museum of memories, each one mocking me with the reminder that I wasn't part of the present. That's when the anxiety set in. I started to dread my phone buzzing, terrified it would be another cruel reminder, or worse, that it would stay silent forever. The hardest part wasn't just Lily. It was everyone around her who went along with it. My sister, my cousins, even my closest friend avoided the topic of the wedding, and when they did speak, their words carried hidden knives. "Maybe Lily just needs space," one relative said. "Don't take it personally." "Weddings are stressful," another added. I wanted to scream, "How do you not take it personally when your own daughter cuts you out?" But I bit my tongue. Each conversation left me feeling smaller, as if I was overreacting, as if my pain was just an inconvenience to others. One afternoon, I bumped into my cousin Claire at the store. She smiled nervously, and after some small talk, she blurted, "I'm sorry you weren't at the engagement party." It was beautiful. Her words burned. She didn't even realize how deeply they twisted the knife. All I could do was nod and escape before I broke down in front of her. When I returned home, I sat in my car for nearly 20 minutes, gripping the steering wheel and staring at the empty driveway. I couldn't make myself go inside. The house, once a place of comfort, now felt like a punishment. The betrayal wasn't just Lily's, it was communal. It felt like a coordinated effort, a silent agreement that Margaret didn't belong anymore. And in that moment, I started to wonder, if my family could discard me so easily, maybe they never valued me at all. Sleep became a stranger. I would lie, in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every memory of raising Lily. I remembered late-night fevers, school plays, whispered secrets after nightmares. I had given her my everything, and now she treated me like nothing. I got up often, wandering the house at odd hours. The ticking clock seemed louder in the silence. Sometimes I'd catch myself talking out loud, as if explaining my pain to an invisible audience. "What did I do wrong?" I'd whisper. "Why doesn't she want me there?" My late husband's photo on the mantel became my confidant. I'd sit with it, tears streaming down my face, asking him questions he couldn't answer. Would you have stopped this if you were still here? Would she have dared to push me away like this? The lack of sleep bled into my days. I forgot simple tasks, misplaced bills, and even missed work deadlines. My boss grew concerned, asking if I needed time off. But what good would time off do? More hours alone, drowning in thoughts that wouldn't let me rest. Exhaustion made me fragile. One morning, after seeing another set of photos online, this time of Lily cake tasting with her in-laws, I slammed my laptop shut and screamed into the empty room. My voice cracked, raw and broken, echoing off the walls. But no one came. No one asked if I was okay, because in their eyes, I no longer mattered. It all came to a head one Sunday afternoon. I had convinced myself to attend church, hoping the familiar rituals might soothe me. But as soon as I walked in, I spotted a group of women whispering near the pews. I caught fragments of their conversation, Lily's name, the wedding, the excitement, and then one of them glanced at me with pity. That look broke something inside me. I barely made it through the service. As soon as I got home, I collapsed on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. My chest hurt, my throat ached, and for the first time, I wondered if the pain would ever stop. It wasn't just about missing the events. It was about losing my daughter, my family, my identity. I wasn't just excluded, I was invisible. That day, I realized something chilling. If I kept living like this, I might not survive the grief. In my darkest hours, I wrote a letter to Lily. It was raw, unfiltered, filled with everything I could never say out loud. I told her about the nights I couldn't sleep, about the tears that wouldn't stop. I reminded her of all the times I had been there, every scraped knee, every heartbreak, every success. I asked her why I wasn't enough now. The letter grew longer than I expected. 10 pages, front and back. Some lines were tender, others searing with anger. "You've abandoned me for a new family," I wrote at one point. "But don't forget, you wouldn't be who you are without me." When I finished, I folded the pages neatly, sealed them in an envelope, and wrote her name on the front. But I never sent it. Instead, I tucked it into my nightstand drawer, where it sat like a secret confession. Part of me hoped she would find it one day, maybe after I was gone. Another part of me feared she never would. That letter was both a release and a prison. It gave me words, but it also reminded me that I wasn't brave enough to confront her directly. At least, not yet. As the wedding drew closer, something inside me began to shift. The pain was still there, sharp and relentless, but beneath it, a small flame of defiance sparked. I realized I couldn't keep waiting for Lily to choose me. She had made her choice, and it didn't include me. But that didn't mean I had to fade quietly into the background. I began taking small steps. I joined a local book club. I volunteered at a shelter once a week. I forced myself to reconnect with people who saw me, not just as an accessory to Lily's life, but as a person of my own. The world outside my grief felt strange, even hostile at times, but it was also a reminder I was still here. Every act of defiance was a whisper to myself. They may not want me, but I still exist. And little did I know that whisper was only the beginning. 2 weeks after I had resigned myself to being invisible, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. My heart skipped when I saw Lily's handwriting on the front. For a moment, I thought she had changed her mind, that maybe she wanted me back in her life. But when I opened it, my chest sank. It wasn't a personal note. It was a generic invitation to the bridal shower, sent like an afterthought. No handwritten message, no, "I hope you can come, Mom." Just my name on the envelope and a pre-printed card inside. I sat at the kitchen table staring at it. My hands trembled between anger and longing. Was this pity? Was this Lily's way of checking a box, making it look like she had included me while still keeping me at arm's length? Part of me wanted to tear it up and throw it in the trash. Another part wanted to go, to show her I could still hold my head high. But mostly, I wanted to scream. After everything, after months of being left out, this was all she could offer? I placed the card on the counter and walked away, but every time I passed it, I felt the sting. It wasn't inclusion, it was charity. I spent days agonizing over that invitation. Friends told me to attend, to be the bigger person. But my gut told me otherwise. Why should I put myself in a room where whispers would follow me, where people would glance at me with pity, knowing I was the mother who wasn't truly wanted? Attending would feel like participating in my own humiliation. And yet, not going carried its own pain. Would Lily use it as proof that I didn't care? Would she spin the story so that I looked like the one who had walked away? One evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat with the invitation one last time. I traced Lily's name on the card, remembering when I used to write it on birthday cakes, school forms, permission slips. All those years, her name had been tied to my existence, and now it was tied to my exclusion. Finally, I made a decision. I would not go. Not because I didn't love her, but because I loved myself enough not to walk into a room where I was only half welcome. I placed the invitation back in its envelope, sealed it shut again, and tucked it in the same drawer where I had hidden the letter I never sent. This time, though, the act wasn't surrender. It was survival. The consequences came quickly. Within a week, relatives started calling. "Why didn't you come to the shower?" one aunt asked, her tone dripping with judgment. Another sent a text. "Everyone noticed you weren't there." Lily was so hurt. So hurt. The words made me laugh bitterly. Hurt? As if I hadn't been gutted for months. As if her calculated exclusion hadn't carved me hollow. Now, because I chose not to play the role of the desperate, begging mother, I was painted as the villain. The whisper network grew louder. Friends pulled away. Cousins avoided eye contact. Even neighbors gave me looks that said, "We heard about you." I became the family cautionary tale. The mother who couldn't let go, who couldn't be supportive. No one acknowledged the cruelty that led me here. It was easier for them to rewrite the narrative than to face the uncomfortable truth. For the first time, though, I didn't rush to defend myself. I let them whisper, let them build their stories. I was too tired to fight lies with explanations. If Lily wanted me to be the villain in her story, so be it. But I wouldn't let her dictate my ending. One night, after a particularly harsh call from a cousin accusing me of ruining the family dynamic, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror. My reflection startled me. Dark circles under my eyes, lines etched deeper than I remembered. A posture bent from months of carrying grief. For the first time, I said the words out loud. This is killing me. The woman staring back wasn't the Margaret I remembered. She wasn't vibrant or hopeful or strong. She was shrinking, disappearing into shadows cast by people who claimed to love her. That moment became a reckoning. I could either keep spiraling into despair, waiting for scraps of acknowledgement from my daughter, or I could choose myself. For the first time in months, I made a promise, not to Lily, not to the family, but to myself. I would not disappear. Keeping that promise wasn't easy, but I started small. I returned to the book club I had joined earlier. At first I sat quietly, still haunted by my private storm. But gradually I began to speak up, to laugh at jokes, to engage with people who didn't see me as Lily's mother, but simply as Margaret. I also started attending community events, craft fairs, volunteer drives, charity fundraisers. To my surprise, people welcomed me without conditions. They valued my presence for what I gave, not for the family role I was supposed to play. One evening, after volunteering at a food bank, a woman my age hugged me tightly and said, "You're exactly the kind of person we need more of." I nearly broke down right there. For months, I had been made to feel unwanted, and now here was someone telling me I was needed. That night, as I drove home, I realized something. Family doesn't always mean blood. Sometimes, family is the circle that chooses you, the one that sees your worth when others don't. For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. As Lily's wedding day drew near, the pressure mounted. The family whispers grew sharper, the tension thicker. I knew I would not be invited, at least not in the way a mother should be. Maybe a token seat in the back, maybe no invitation at all. I braced myself for the sting. But strangely, I also felt stronger than before. The pain was still real, but it wasn't all-consuming anymore. I had other circles now, other people who saw me, other reasons to get up in the morning. Still, the thought of that day haunted me. I pictured Lily in her gown, smiling for photographs, laughing with people who had replaced me. I pictured myself at home, sitting in silence, pretending it was just another Saturday. And then I asked myself, do I really want to spend her wedding day mourning? Or do I want to reclaim it as something else? I didn't have the answer yet, but I knew one thing: I would not let that day break me. The night before the wedding, I sat at my kitchen table, a candle burning low. The silence was thick, but inside me, a decision was forming. I could not control Lily. I could not force her to see me, to value me, to love me as I deserved. But I could control myself, so I made a vow. Tomorrow, while she celebrated a union I wasn't truly part of, I would create my own ritual, my own reclamation. I didn't know yet if it meant traveling somewhere new, hosting a dinner with friends, or simply writing my story. But I knew it would be mine, for the first time in months. I went to bed not dreading the next day, but preparing for it. The tears still came. But beneath them was something else, a quiet strength, and in that strength, a whisper. They may have erased me from their story, but I will write my own. The morning of Lily's wedding arrived with a heavy stillness. I woke before dawn, my heart pounding as if my body already knew the weight of the day. Normally, a wedding day for a daughter would be filled with laughter, hairpins scattered across the bathroom counter, and a flurry of last-minute details. For me, it was silence. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring out the window. The sun rose as though it were just any other Saturday, but for me it was the sharpest reminder of what I had lost. My daughter was dressing in white, walking down an aisle, creating a new chapter, and I wasn't even a footnote. Neighbors' cars began leaving for the church, decorated with ribbons and flowers. I watched them drive past my house, each one a messenger of my exclusion. The temptation to crawl back into bed was strong, but I forced myself to stand. No, I wouldn't hide. I put on a dress, not for them, but for me. Something simple, navy blue, the kind of dress I wore when I wanted to feel like myself again. As I zipped it up, I told myself, today I choose dignity. Today I choose me. By mid-morning, the house felt unbearable. Every corner whispered with memories of Lily. Her giggles on the staircase, the photos still hanging in the hallway, the dent in the couch cushion where she used to curl up. Staying there felt like suffocating under ghosts. So I left. I drove aimlessly at first, passing the florist where I once bought her corsages, the diner where we had breakfast after doctor appointments, the boutique where I helped her pick her prom dress. Each landmark hit like a bruise, but instead of turning away, I faced them. Finally, I ended up at the park. Children laughed on the swings, couples walked hand in hand, and families spread blankets for picnics. The world was moving forward, oblivious to my personal storm. I sat on a bench and let the sounds wash over me. For the first time in months, I breathed deeply, realizing something important. Even though my family had pushed me out, life around me hadn't stopped. The world was still wide and alive, and maybe, just maybe, there was still a place in it for me. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. Lily's name flashed across the screen. My throat tightened. Was she reaching out in guilt? Was she calling to extend some half-hearted invitation, asking me to just come for the pictures, or join the reception for a little while? I stared at the screen, frozen. My finger hovered over the accept button. But then I remembered the months of silence, the parties I wasn't told about, the dinners I wasn't invited to, the whispers that painted me as difficult. The buzzing stopped. A minute later, a voicemail notification appeared. My hands shook as I pressed play. "Hi, Mom, I just wanted to say, I hope you're okay today. I know this has been hard, but I hope you understand. That was all she offered me. No apology. No acknowledgement of the pain she had caused. Just a request that I understand. For the first time, I deleted her message without saving it. I didn't need to understand her anymore. She needed to understand me. Later that evening, I received a text from my cousin Claire. "I wish you were here. People keep asking about you." I pictured the reception hall, the glittering lights, the clinking glasses, the speeches, and somewhere in the background, whispers about the absent mother. Maybe some pitied me, maybe some judged me, maybe some even celebrated my absence, but the thought didn't crush me like it once would have. For the first time, I realized something powerful. They could talk all they wanted, but I had chosen my dignity. I wasn't the desperate mother begging for scraps anymore. I was a woman who had faced the storm and stayed standing. Their whispers belonged to them. My peace belonged to me. 2 days after the wedding, I received an email from one of Lily's bridesmaids, a young woman named Sophie. She wrote, "Mrs. Carter, I just wanted to say, I don't think it was right the way things happened. You should have been there. Everyone knew it. Some of us even said it to Lily. I don't know if it helps, but I wanted you to know someone saw you." I reread that email a dozen times, tears streaming down my face. For months, I had felt erased, as if no one noticed the cruelty. But here was proof that at least one person had. Sophie's words didn't erase the hurt, but they lit a small lantern in the darkness. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't forgotten. And if one person saw me, maybe others would too. The week after the wedding, I sat down at my desk with a blank notebook. Instead of writing another letter to Lily, I began writing to myself. I wrote about the pain, the sleepless nights, the whispers. But I also wrote about the strength I found in book clubs, in volunteer work, in Sophie's unexpected kindness. I wrote about choosing dignity over desperation, about discovering that family could be chosen. Page after page, I poured out not just the story of exclusion, but the story of survival. And as I wrote, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to believe. My life wasn't over. Lily's rejection was a chapter. Painful, yes, but it wasn't the final chapter. This was my story, and I was taking the pen back. Weeks later, Lily finally called again. This time I answered. Her voice was tentative. "Mom, I thought you'd come." I thought I cut her off gently but firmly. "Lily, for months you excluded me. You made choices that hurt me deeply. And then you asked me to understand. But here's what you need to understand. I will not beg to be part of my own daughter's life." Silence. On her end and then on mine, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply told her the truth, and in that truth, I felt lighter than I had in months. After my conversation with Lily, the phone stayed quiet for days. No follow-up text, no apology, no sudden invitation to brunch, just silence. At first, the quiet felt like another rejection, another layer of absence pressed against my chest. But as the days stretched into weeks, something surprising happened. I didn't feel crushed. I felt free. The storm of anticipation, the constant wondering if today she would call, if tomorrow I would be included, was gone. I no longer lived in limbo. Instead, I lived in the clarity of reality. Painful as it was, clarity gave me room to breathe. For the first time in months, I opened my curtains wide, letting sunlight flood the house. I brewed coffee not out of habit, but because I wanted it. I walked outside without worrying who might whisper behind my back. The silence wasn't an absence anymore, it was an invitation. An invitation to fill my life with new voices, new laughter, new meaning. One of the first things I did was return to painting. Before Lily was born, I had loved it. Oils and watercolors, blank canvases waiting for color. But somewhere along the way, motherhood had taken over. My brushes collected dust in the attic, forgotten under boxes of Christmas lights and old school projects. One afternoon, I carried them downstairs, cleaned the bristles, and set up a small easel by the window. At first, my strokes were shaky, uncertain, like a language I'd forgotten. But soon, the colors began to flow. Deep blues, fiery reds, golden yellows. My emotions spilled onto the canvas in ways words never could. Hours slipped away. By the time I stepped back, my kitchen table was covered in paint-stained rags, and my first finished piece in decades stood before me. It wasn't perfect, but neither was I, and maybe that was the point. Painting gave me something Lily's absence had stolen, a reminder that I was more than a mother. I was Margaret, a woman with passions, with talents, with a voice that didn't require anyone else's approval, and for the first time in years, I felt proud of myself. Weeks later, my book club held a small community fair. Each member was encouraged to showcase a hobby or talent. I hesitated at first, but then I brought 2 of my paintings, propped them against a borrowed easel, and stood quietly by my table. I expected little more than polite nods, but to my surprise, people stopped. They asked questions. They admired the colors. One woman even asked if she could buy a piece. I nearly laughed out loud. Someone wanted my art? By the end of the fair, I had sold 1 painting and been invited to join a local artist collective. As I packed up, a strange warmth filled me. For so long, my worth had been tied to whether my daughter wanted me around. Now, complete strangers were valuing me for something entirely my own. Driving home, I realized this wasn't just about art. It was about reclaiming the parts of myself I had buried beneath motherhood. I wasn't disappearing. I was re-emerging. The more I stepped out into the world, the more I discovered something profound. Family isn't always blood. The women in my book club, the artists in the collective, the volunteers at the food bank, they became my circle. They called to check on me. They invited me to dinners, not out of obligation, but out of genuine care. They asked about my life, my thoughts, my art. With them, I didn't have to tiptoe around unspoken wounds. I didn't have to beg for a seat at the table. I belonged simply because I showed up as myself. One evening, after a long volunteer shift, we gathered around pizza boxes in the shelter's break room. Someone raised a toast to Margaret for reminding us it's never too late to start again. Their voices chorused in agreement, and tears welled in my eyes. I had lost 1 family, yes. But in its place, I was building another, one chosen with love, not bound by obligation. Months after the wedding, I opened the nightstand drawer and found the old letter I had written to Lily, the 10-page confession I never sent. I unfolded it. Reading through the raw words, the anger, the heartbreak, it felt like revisiting a ghost. But instead of fueling my pain, it made me realize how far I had come. So I wrote a new letter, not to Lily, but to myself. In it, I acknowledged everything I had endured. I praised myself for surviving the exclusion, the whispers, the loneliness. I celebrated the woman who had picked up a paintbrush again, who had built a new circle of love, who had chosen dignity over desperation. This letter wasn't a plea for recognition. It was a declaration of resilience. When I sealed it and tucked it into the drawer, I smiled. This wasn't a letter I needed anyone else to read. It was for me, and me alone. Lily and I spoke occasionally after that. Surface-level conversations about the weather, about her job, about trivial things. But she never offered the apology I once longed for, and that was okay. I realized closure doesn't always come with grand apologies or tearful reconciliations. Sometimes, closure is deciding that you don't need someone else's permission to move forward. One afternoon, I took down Lily's childhood photos from the hallway, not out of anger but out of peace. I carefully wrapped them in tissue and placed them in a box labeled Memories. They would always be part of my past, but they no longer had to haunt my present. In their place, I hung my paintings. Bright, bold, unapologetic colors. My house finally reflected not just who I had been, but who I was becoming. That act, reclaiming my walls, felt like the final step in reclaiming my life. On the anniversary of my husband's passing, I drove to the ocean, a place he had loved. I stood on the shore, waves crashing against the rocks, wind tangling my hair. For years I had carried both his absence and Lily's rejection like anchors. But standing there, I felt lighter. I whispered to him, "I'm okay now. I'm building something new." And I meant it. When I returned home, I hosted a dinner, not with the family that had disowned me, but with the friends who had become my chosen family. Laughter filled the house again, bouncing off the walls like it hadn't in years. As I cleared the table later, I looked around and thought, this is my legacy. Not bitterness, not exclusion, but resilience. Lily thought she had written me out of her story. But the truth was, I was writing a story of my own, one of strength, renewal, and freedom. Closing my journal that night, I penned the final line. They thought they could erase me, but I rose anyway.